Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game from the FIDE 2020 online Olympiad. It's Clash India versus Poland, and this is match 2. So the return match. In the first match, Poland defeated India 4-2 with Duda beating Anand on board 1 and Radoslav Wojtaszek beating Vidit on board 2. And now India needs a win to get back into the match. So this is a really crazy game. I didn't show any of the games of the Olympiad so far as I've been very busy. But I will show some of them from the semifinals and also from the finals. So let's just update this as forgot to update this. There we go. So let's check it out. Really a wild game, and the Duda opens with d4. Sorry about that. We have knight to f6 by Anand and c4. We have e6 and knight to c3, inviting Anand to do an Nimzo Indian, which Anand goes for. So bishop to b4, the Nimzo Indian defense is on the board, and e3 going for the classical line. We have castles by Anand and bishop to d3. Just continuing development, we have d5. All standard Nimzo stuff, and knight to f3. We have captures on c4, bishop captures, and now striking in the center with c5. You could also go for b6 with the idea of just switching, trading off the bishops with bishop to a6, but Anand chooses a different approach. So c5, this is the most popular line. We have a3. And bishop captures on c3 now. We have b captures and queen to c7. Now threatening captures on d4, opening up the attack on the bishop. And here usually you're going to move the bishop either to a2 or e2, maybe b3 as in some rare cases. But here Duda goes for bishop to e2. We have b6, now preparing to put this bishop on this beautiful diagonal, and Anand just castles. We have bishop to b7, and Duda is very happy with his development. We have knight to e5 by Anand, getting the knight to this very nice outpost. And now, no one moves here, a rook to d8 and knight b to d7, but Anand goes for knight to c6, and it is as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So Duda trades here, we have captures, and now to avoid checkmate you have to play something. With bishop to f3, it looks very nice, but you don't actually get to trade off the dark square bishop as the light square bishop as knight e4, and black will be very happy with this excellent outpost for the knight. He's going to play f5, cement that knight, and play the game on. So here, instead, after queen captures on c6 with f3, Duda prevents checkmate and also takes away these squares from Anand's knight. And rook f to d8 now, aligning the rook nicely with the queen on the maybe soon to be open d file. Bishop to b2, and now knight to d5. This knight is now coming, well, you want to get the knight over to a4, and from a4, to a5, and from a5 the knight will be extremely strong. So queen d2, and now we have b5. We have e4, kicking the knight back, and the knight to b6, to a4 I meant. We have rook f to d1, and now knight to a4. And here knight is on an excellent square, putting pressure on the bishop, putting pressure on c3. At some point you might play c4, if d5 you might even get some squares on b3 and d3, who knows. One of the cases where knight is actually very, very useful on the rim. So rook a to b1, preparing bishop to a1, and now although this bishop could be strong at some point, the knight will also be very strong. So Anand, of course, doesn't trade the knight for the bishop. We have a6, and now bishop to a1. We have c4 by Anand, now getting the b3 square as an outpost. If at some point the d5 is played, if Duda tries to create a pass pawn, then you might be able to go something like knight c5, knight b3, or knight to d3. We have queen to f4 by Duda, and now the immediate f5 by Anand. Sort of gambiting a pawn, but not really, because rook to f8 will win back the pawn. But the Duda does capture. He goes e captures on f5, and now Anand just attacks it, rook to f8. So preparing to recapture it, we have rook to e1 by Duda, and knight to b6. There's no rush in recapturing the pawn. And now, if you try to defend the pawn with something like g4, that's way too adventurous. Captures, knight d5 attacks the queen. You can easily bring the rook into the attack, attack the pawn, win it later, and it's not going to be much of a problem. And the white's king side is ruined. So after knight b6, we have bishop to d1, now shifting the bishop over to c2, and here we have knight to d5, pushing the queen back, and only then will Anand recapture the pawn. Queen to d2, and now e captures on f5. We have bishop to c2, and now queen to d6. We have bishop to b2. Now you need to guard both of these pawns. The knight constantly puts pressure on the c3 pawn, and the queen constantly now puts pressure on the a3 pawn. So bishop to b2, not the most active square for the bishop, but what are you going to do? So bishop to c6 by Anand, and now rook to e5. A very nice rook lift, preparing rook b to e1. With f4, now creating another excellent outpost for the knight here on e3, and rook b to e1. Finally doubling up those rooks, but now knight to e3. Disconnecting the rooks, and you are not easily getting rid of this knight from e3. So bishop to c1, preparing queen to f2 to eliminate the knight from e3, and now rook a to e8. And here it's very, very interesting. If you go for captures, then it's very, very easy for black to play this. You could try queen to f2, but then the knight just returns to d5, constantly putting pressure on this pawn, and black will be very happy trading off the rooks, as it's not going to be easy for white to ever activate this dark square bishop. You just don't want to trade this knight for the bishop. So instead, Duda goes queen to f2 right away, now preparing to capture on e3. But now Anand just goes back. He says, I'm very happy to trade both of the rooks, but you do need to take care of these pawns constantly. So bishop back to b2, Duda defends them, and only now rook captures on e5. We have d captures and queen e6. And now, while the light square bishop is very strong, the dark square bishop is pretty much stuck here, doing absolutely nothing. So bishop back to c1, but now bishop to e8, preparing to counter the light square bishop on this diagonal. And if we trade off the light square bishops, then it's going to be this dark square bishop, which isn't doing all that much against this excellent knight. So bishop to e4, Duda would gladly even trade off the bishop for a knight. But now he kind of gives up the c3 pawn, but not really. Here Anand grabs the pawn, but Duda finds the very interesting bishop captures on h7 check. And now, if you don't capture it, if you just play something like king to h8, then you can just go bishop back to c2, and nothing happens. But Anand decides it's okay to do this. King captures on h7, queen to c2 with check, bishop to g6 now, and queen captures on c3. So you won back your piece and your pawn, but you've helped white get this bishop on this beautiful diagonal. And it's still not clear what are you going to do with your dark square bishop. But if black isn't able to do anything either, then it's not going to be that much of a problem. And here Anand goes bishop to d3. Bishop to d3, he's clearing the path for the g pawn. He wants to play g5, g4, bust open the king side. Rook to d8, on the other hand, was also very, very dangerous, but it comes with the temporary sacrifice of the f4 pawn. So if you allow Duda to capture it, rook d3 attacks the queen, queen b2, and now you can start pushing your passed pawn. Pawn c3, pawn c2, the bishop already covers the c2 square, would be very dangerous. But Anand has a different plan. He goes bishop to d3, makes way for the g pawn, and queen to d4 now. We have g5 by Anand, and now bishop to d2. We have g4, preparing to bust open the position, so Duda captures on g4. We have f3, and now captures. We have captures by Anand, and now bishop to e3. As it can get very dangerous. For example, if you move the rook from the back rank, rook to f1 is extremely strong, then queen to c6 could come, will be extremely strong. So Duda plays bishop to e3, he prepares queen to a7 check. And here we have something extremely weird that happens. Anand plays queen to f7. Of course, now if rook to f1 lands, that's just game. So Duda plays queen to a7, offering a queen trade. And now what you could do is that you could just trade queens here and then play something like a5, b4, try and create more passed pawns here on the queen side, and try and make something of that. But here Anand plays king to g6, and that's an extremely weird move because it gives up a full pawn while not gaining all that much, because Duda captures it with check, and you don't have any ways of improving the activity of your king. You have to go back. So king h7 by Anand, and now queen to a7. Again, attacking the queen here. King to g8, and only now Duda trades with queen captures on f7. We have king captures, and now bishop to c5. And here it's 4 pawns to 2 in Duda's favor, and well, it's just weird for an Anand to give up this a6 pawn like that. But king e6, you don't want to allow e6, e7, and now Duda needs to push for the win. He's up 2 pawns, let's see how he does. King to g2 by Duda, and now rook to f7. Getting back with the rook, bishop to b4, And now rook to c7. Anand also has a pass pawn, so of course he wants to push it with h4. Duda now prepares to push both of his pawns on the king side, and the c3 by Anand with h5 and c2. And of course now bishop to d2, guarding the queening square twice. Rook to d7, preparing some nasty discoveries to maybe capture the bishop here. So bishop to c1. We have bishop to h7 and now g5, preparing g6 and so on. But here Anand finds rook to d1. And now it's a question, what do you do? Your rook is under attack and your bishop is under attack. While it is a very interesting idea, Duda says, I'm not very impressed by this, and Duda just plays g6, attacking the bishop. So you're Anand here, pause the video, what do you do here, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not falling for Duda's bluff. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's actually bishop captures here. If you just go for the rook, then pawn captures, and there's nothing you can do against queening. You have to go for captures, and then you get a queen, and very, very likely black will also get a queen, but it's hard to imagine that you will be able to get out of any checks. So instead of this g6 move that the Duda played, Duda should have just gone king to f2, defend the rook, and then of course he just continues enjoying his material advantage. But here after g6, Anand played bishop captures on g6, and now it's a different story. Because if you capture the pawn now, then just rook captures on e1, and there's nothing to do. The king easily stops the passed pawn. So here, after bishop captures on g6, Duda needs to defend the rook, and now bishop captures on h5. And Anand just gobbled up those 2 pawns, and now the material on the board is completely equal. So first Anand gives up the a6 pawn, and then Duda gives up the 2 connected pass pawns on the king side. That's really, really crazy. So bishop to b2 now. And bishop to g4. Now it's Anand who will be pushing for more than the draw. We have rook to g1 and now bishop to f5, defending the pawn. And now Anand's plan is very simple. He wants to get the king over to b3, and that's going to be game. So rook to e1, king to d5. And now the problem is, if you just wait for Anand to bring his king closer, it's not enough for Duda to hold. For example, bishop e6, you need to stop the pawn. Bishop b2, if you just wait, king c4, bishop c1, king b3, and that's pretty much it. Rook e3 check, you're going to go king a2, king to somewhere, or rook to e1, king to b1, and that's just it. The bishop's going to fall, or you're going to play something like bishop to d2, but then just captures, and of course you promote to a queen, and of course this is not winning. You're just going to eliminate this pawn, get your king over here, and push the pawn. So this is what happens if you just wait for Anand to bring his king closer. So here we have e6 by Duda, trying to get some advantage or some more activity with his pieces, but it's not all that much. Bishop captures on e6. We have rook to e5 check, king to d6 now, and rook to rook back to e1. You need to guard against pawn to c1. We have bishop to c4. And now rook to g1. Now Duda is just forced to repeat here and wait and see what Anand will do. But Anand just goes in with the king. King c5. We have rook to g5 with check and bishop to d5 blocking. Rook g1, you have to guard a queening square. King c4. Rook g4 check. We have king to b3. And now rook to b4 with check. King a2 by Anand. And here we have king to e3. But now once again, pause the video and win this game for Anand while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not going for the most obvious move. As if you do this, then yes, you get the queen, captures, but it's still not going to be easy. If you go for this, then white will capture here, and you're gonna work very, very hard for your meal. Probably not gonna be able to do it with very little time on the clock. So here, after king to e3, Anand played bishop to b3. He just locked out this rook from the defense of the bishop. But rook to b1 is also sufficient, just going after the bishop. But bishop to b3 was played by Anand, and it was in this position on move 69 that young Krzysztof Duda resigned the game. And not only did Anand retaliate, but it was also enough for India to win the match against Poland and go into the finals of the FIDE 2020 online Olympiad. It wasn't so simple. I'll show you the standings here of both matches. Here you have it. Like I said, in the first game, Poland won 4-2 with both Duda and Wojtaszek defeating Anand and Vidit on board 1 and 2. But then in the second game, as you can see, both Anand, Vidit, Hampi Koneru, and Hari Kadronavali won their games, and the score was 4.5, 1.5. And then Armageddon was played, and the Armageddon game fell to the board. Hampi Koneru versus Monica Sochko, and Hampi Koneru was victorious, and that brought India to the finals of the FIDE 2020 Olympiad, where they will face, I'm not going to mention who they're going to face, as we might cover one of the games from that match, from the United States versus Russia match. So I'm not going to spoil it just yet. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Congratulations to India on reaching the finals. We'll see what happens in the finals. I would like to thank Barry McMurdoch, Eric Novak, Corey Tolliver, David Kimura, and Gilad Schechter for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE Olympiad finals, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.